Good evening, visitors, and welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Gerard Pratt, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Warrant Officer Class 1, Virginia Morris. Today, we commemorate the 110th anniversary of the sailing of the First Australian Imperial Force. In 1914, Great Britain declared itself and the forces of its empire to be at war with Germany. Australia responded by raising a volunteer army called the Australian Imperial Force. Better known by its initials, the AIF was intended for service in Europe, while a separate 2,000-man force was formed for the task of capturing German New Guinea, and smaller military forces were maintained in Australia. Officially coming into being on the 15th of August 1914, the AIF consisted of 1 infantry division and 1 light horse brigade. Hastily deployed, the first contingent of the AIF was essentially untrained and suffered from widespread equipment shortages. But there was a distinct character to those that had enlisted in those early months. They were keen. They had to meet tougher physical standards than those who applied later, and they would need to be lucky to survive the next 4 years of war. The first contingent of the AIF departed in a single convoy from Albany in Western Australia on the 1st of November 1914. Originally bound for Egypt to undergo further training prior to deployment to the Western Front, the Australians were then sent to British-controlled Egypt to preempt Turkish attacks against the Suez Canal, and with a view to opening another front against the Central Powers. Eventually, 330,000 Australians served overseas with the AIF, attacking at the Dardanelles, entering Jerusalem and Damascus, defending Amiens and Ypres, and swaggering through the streets of Cairo, Paris and London with their distinctive slouch hats. Today, we remember the sailing of the first contingent of the AIF. We pay our respects to the men and women commemorated here on the Roll of Honour, and to the survivors who returned home. We warmly welcome the family of Lance Corporal Vivian Cyril Brooke, whose story you will hear shortly. This evening, we're also honoured to acknowledge Mr. Martin Kowalewski, Chargé d'Affaires, Embassy of Poland, and Mr. Piotr Rakowski, Consul General of the Republic of Poland. As always, we welcome the veterans who have served, those who are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome the members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by family, visitors to the memorial, and students on behalf of the Muslim Girls Grammar School, Granville, New South Wales. If able, please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. Students, those that are able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through until the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Lance Corporal Vivian Cyril Brooke. Vivian Brooke was born on the 19th of June 1887 in Hobart, Tasmania. He was the fourth of 6 children born to Robert and Amy Brooke. Family lived in Hobart, where Vivian attended the Friends School, a Quaker-run co-educational school. After finishing school, Vivian moved in with his older sister, Isoline, and began working as a bank clerk in 1906. That same year, his father was committed to the South Australian Destitute Asylum, suffering from old age, rheumatoidism, and the incontinence of mind. Unable to live with his family in Tasmania because of the climate, Robert Brooke died in the asylum in April 1906, leaving Amy, a widow, with Vivian and his young siblings in the care of their elder sister. Vivian was an active member of the local community and a member of the 1st Battalion of the Tasmanian Rangers. In 1910, he was promoted to lieutenant. Brooke enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force on the 20th of August 1914, shortly after the outbreak of war. Although he was initially granted the rank of corporal, at his own request he was demoted to private with the 12th Australian Infantry Battalion. After 2 months of training, Brooke left Hobart on the 20th of October in HMAT Geelong A2. The battalion left Albany with the 1st Australian Convoy in November 1914. They arrived in Alexandria on the 9th of December and spent the rest of 1914 and the beginning of 1915 training at Mena Camp before relocating to the Greek islands of Lemnos, before the landing at Gallipoli. The 12th Battalion left Lemnos on the evening of the 24th of April, anchoring off the coast of the Gallipoli Peninsula with other Allied troop ships. The battalion landed on the beach at Anzac Cove just after 4 a.m. on the 25th of April and began the arduous ascent towards the objectives under Turkish fire. In the chaos, the members of the battalion were separated, mixing with men from other units. Brooke survived the landing and was promoted to Lance Corporal. The next day, he was part of an advance line of about 20 men making an attack on Ottoman positions in the White Valley, south of Anzac Cove. With Ottomans counter-attacking the rear, a retreat was decided upon. However, Brooke refused to retire. He was not seen by his comrades again. Brooke was reported as missing and his family was notified. In August 1915, the United States Embassy received a report from a private source that Brooke had died in the Bigha Military Hospital in May 1915 as a prisoner of war. This was passed to his family. In November, Brooke's mother, Amy, contacted the Australian Base Records requesting confirmation of his death. She wrote, "Hope dies hard, and we cling to the idea that there might be a case of mistaken identity so far as the death goes." Base Records replied that they had no official report of Brooke's death, despite the family having written to the Australian High Commissioner in London. A week later, they heard that Brooke had actually died of wounds on the 29th of August 1915. Base Records also wrote that although the report of his death came from a private source, it was most probably true. The family was contacted again at the end of November and were told that Brooke was believed to be dead, but there was no definite evidence. Brooke's sister Moina wrote again to the Base Records in December 1915, hoping to send her mother some good news before Christmas. The family's persistence and the confusion over the date of Brooke's death promoted an investigation into the case by the Foreign Affairs Office in London, the US Embassy in Turkey, the Australian Red Cross Society, the Australian High Commissioner for Australia in London, and Base Records in Australia throughout 1916. The investigation was largely inconclusive. It did confirm that Lance Corporal Vivian Brooke has died in hospital at Bigha in Turkey after being captured as a prisoner of war. He most likely died from shrapnel wounds to his left clavicle and right side sustained between the 4th and the 9th of May 1915. He was 27 years old. Vivian was buried in the Christian cemetery at Bigha, Turkey. His remains were exhumed in 1922 and reinterred in the Anglo-French cemetery at Khalid Baha in Turkey, and again in 1926 at Ari Banu Cemetery. His grave inscription, selected by his siblings, read, "Faithful unto death." His name is also listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Vivian Cyril Brooke, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
If able, please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old as we the left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozieres, or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.